In the heart of the Iron Moon Kingdom, a land forged in lunar light and ancient magic, lived a girl named Seraphina. Unlike the powerful alphas and steadfast betas who commanded respect, Seraphina was an omega, her existence often overlooked, her destiny seemingly pre-written. In a society that valued strength above all, she was considered delicate, a fragile bloom in a forest of iron oaks. But beneath her quiet exterior, a spirit of untamed fire simmered, waiting for its moment to ignite. Seraphina spent her days in the royal archives, a labyrinth of forgotten lore and whispered histories. While others sought power in the training yards, she found it in the brittle pages of old tomes. She learned of a time before the rigid hierarchy of Alpha, Beta, and Omega, a time when magic flowed freely, unbound by social standing. It was in one of these dust-covered scrolls that she discovered the prophecy of the starfall bloom, a legendary flower said to blossom only once a century, capable of rewriting one's fate. A prophecy spoke of an Omega, pure of heart, who could harness its power to bring balance back to the kingdom. A spark of hope, wild and dangerous, flickered to life within her. Her quest began under the cloak of a moonless night. She slipped away from the castle, her only companions a satchel of dried fruit, a water skin, and the ancient map she had painstakingly pieced together. The journey was perilous. She traversed the whispering woods, where ancient trees murmured secrets of those who had failed before her, their ghostly voices trying to lure her from her path. She navigated the treacherous serpent-spine mountains, where the air was thin and the winds howled like mournful wolves. Along the way, she used the knowledge she'd gathered from her books, identifying edible plants, finding shelter in hidden caves, and avoiding the territory of fearsome beasts. She was not a warrior, but she was a survivor, her mind her sharpest weapon. One evening, while taking refuge from a sudden storm, she stumbled upon a wounded wolf, its fur the color of midnight, its leg caught in a cruel hunter's trap. Its golden eyes, full of pain and defiance, met hers. This was no ordinary wolf. It was a dire wolf, a creature of immense power and pride, known to be fiercely loyal to alphas. Any other Omega would have fled in terror. But Seraphina saw only a creature in agony. Carefully she approached, her movements slow and deliberate, her voice a soft murmur. She worked patiently, her nimble fingers loosening the metal jaws of the trap. The moment it was free, the wolf did not flee. Instead, it licked her hand, a gesture of profound gratitude and acceptance. From that moment on, the wolf, whom she named Onyx, became her shadow, her guardian. Their bond was unheard of an Omega and a dire wolf. Her gentle nature seemed to soothe the beast's wild spirit, and its presence gave her a newfound confidence. Together, they faced the trials of the wild. When a territorial griffin swooped down from the cliffs, Onyx fought with tooth and claw, while Seraphina used her knowledge of herbs to create a potent smokescreen, disorienting the beast and allowing them to escape. Her perceived weakness, her gentle, nurturing Omega nature, was proving to be a unique form of strength. She wasn't overpowering her obstacles. She was outsmarting them, harmonizing with the world around her in a way no alpha could. News of an Omega traveling with a dire wolf spread like wildfire, carried by merchants and travelers. The stories reached the ears of Kalen, the crown prince of the Iron Moon Kingdom. An alpha of immense power and reputation, Kalen was intrigued. He was tired of the political posturing and the endless parade of people who sought his favor. The tale of the gentle Omega, who had tamed a dire wolf and defied all expectations, was a breath of fresh air. He decided he had to see this for himself and set out from the capital, his royal guards in tow. He found her at the edge of the Crystal Mire, a swamp known for its illusory mists. Seraphina was calmly gathering rare mosses, Onyx resting peacefully at her side. She didn't bow or cower when he approached. She simply met his gaze, her violet eyes clear and steady. Kalen had expected to find a reckless girl, but instead he found a woman of quiet strength and profound wisdom. He was captivated. He saw past the Omega designation to the fierce spirit within. He saw the leader she could be. Kalen dismissed his guards, choosing to walk with her. He listened as she spoke of her quest for the starfall bloom, not for personal power, but to restore balance. She spoke of a kingdom where worth wasn't determined by birth, but by character. Her vision was radical, yet it resonated with a deep-seated desire for change that he himself felt. He had grown weary of the rigid system that bred conflict and arrogance. In Serafina, he saw not just a potential mate, but a partner, a queen who could heal the fractured kingdom. He offered her his protection and his aid, not as a superior alpha, but as an equal. Together, they finally reached the summit of Mount Cinder, the dormant volcano where the starfall bloom was said to grow. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, a single bud, shimmering with celestial light, began to unfurl. It pulsed with a gentle energy, bathing the peak in an ethereal glow. It was more beautiful than any legend had described. The prophecy was real. Serafina reached out her hand, not to claim its power, but to commune with it. As her fingers brushed against its petals, a wave of energy washed over her. It didn't change her into an alpha. It didn't erase who she was. Instead, it amplified her very essence. Her innate Omega abilities of empathy, intuition, and healing were magnified 1,000-fold. The bloom recognized the purity of her heart and granted her the power to nurture, to mend, to unite. When they returned to the Iron Moon Kingdom, they were not the same people who had left. Serafina, the quiet Omega from the archives, now walked with an unshakable confidence, her presence a calming balm to the kingdom's anxieties. Kalen, the powerful Alpha Prince, now ruled with a newfound humility and wisdom, his strength tempered by her compassion. Their union challenged every tradition, every prejudice. They showed the kingdom that true strength wasn't about dominance, but about partnership. It wasn't about the power you were born with, but the good you chose to do with it. Serafina never became an alpha. She didn't need to. She remained an Omega, but she redefined what that meant. She was Serafina, the Omega Queen, who healed a kingdom not with a sword, but with a gentle heart and an unbreakable will, proving that even the most delicate flower can have roots of iron. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey today. If you enjoyed Seraphine's story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more tales from incredible worlds. Until next time, stay curious and keep reading. Clean it up, Delia said softly. All of it, or I'll report you to the head of Omega Services for insubordination and damaged floor materials. The Gamma boys were watching. Serafina looked at the soaking floor. She looked at her soaking tunic. She looked at the scrubbing brush spinning to a stop against the far wall. Don't, said the sensible part of her, the 6 years of practice part, the part that had been keeping her alive and invisible and safe. Just clean it up. It doesn't matter. None of this matters. Pick up the brush. She picked up the brush. Behind her she heard Delia's shoes click away toward the door, heard her murmur something to the Gamma boys, heard them laugh, properly laugh this time, relieved to have been given the correct response. The entertainment resolved neatly in the expected direction. Serafina scrubbed the floor. The light inside her was not quiet. It pushed at her sternum like a fist. It ran up her spine in hot white pulses. Her vision flickered. She was seeing double for a moment, the ordinary gray wash hall overlaid with something else, something that looked like the same hall, lit from below by cold silver fire. She pressed her hand to the floor. Down she told it, the way she had told it down 100 times. Not now, not yet, please, and the light subsided. But it was slower this time than the times before. And the voice in the back of her mind, the one that wasn't quite her own, said something it had never said before, in a tone that was not a request, but a statement of inevitable fact. The waiting is almost over. By evening, the story had changed in the retelling. By the time it reached the Beta halls, carried on the invisible current of pack gossip that moved faster through the Iron Moon Kingdom than any official communication. The story was that an Omega girl had spoken back to a ranked wolf, had challenged Dahlia in front of witnesses, had shown signs of aggression unbefitting her station. By the time it reached the ears of Madame Voss, the head of Omega, service as a beta woman of 60 with the face of someone who had been deeply disappointed by the world and had decided to make the world pay for it, it had become a near incident requiring official documentation. Serafina was summoned. She stood in Madame Voss's office, a severe room lined with ledgers and smelling of old paper and cold tea, and listened to her. Infraction read back to her in the dry, formal language of pack bureaucracy. "It is recorded," Madame Voss said, not looking up from the ledger, "that Omega Serafina Vale engaged in an act of verbal challenge against ranked member Delia of the second Omega tier, in the presence of multiple Gamma-class witnesses, constituting a violation of Pack Law Article 19 subsection 4, behavioral expectations of lower-tier Pack members in the presence of higher-ranking individuals." "I said her name," Serafina said. Madame Voss looked up. It was not a kind look. "The manner in which a statement is made," Madame Voss said, "is as material as the statement itself. The witnesses report a tone of challenge, a posture of challenge. This is not the first notation in your file, Serafina. In 6 years you have 17 behavioral flags, all of them minor, but 17 combined is a pattern." She set down her pen. "The Alpha King has returned. The Luna selection is expected to be announced within the fortnight. The entire pack hierarchy is under scrutiny. This is not the time for an Omega to be developing patterns." Serafina looked at the floor. "You will be reassigned," Madame Voss said. "Effective tomorrow, you are moved to exterior groundskeeping. The north grounds, specifically, the section adjacent to the boundary wall. The north grounds. The coldest, most remote part of the castle exterior, rarely visited by anyone ranked, which was precisely the point. Exile dressed as reassignment." "Understood," Serafina said. She left. The north grounds were, unexpectedly, beautiful. Not in the manicured, intentional way of the East Garden. This was wilder, less governed. The boundary wall was ancient stone, black with age, traced with frost moss and old climbing vines that had given up on being directed and now went wherever they pleased. Beyond the wall, the northern forest began, dark pine and silver birch stretching for miles, their upper canopies catching the wind and moving in slow, speaking waves. Serafina raked dead leaves from the frost-hardened ground and breathed the cold pine air and felt, for the first time in a very long time, something almost approaching peace. There was no one here. Not Delia, not Madame Voss, not ranked wolves watching her with the clinical disinterest of people observing furniture. Just the forest and the wall and the cold November light falling in long pale blades through the trees. She worked in silence, and after a while the light inside her settled into something less frantic, a slow pulse, like a candle flame in still air, warm and patient. She was so absorbed in this unaccustomed quiet that she didn't hear the footsteps until they were nearly beside her. She looked up. Lucian Draven stood at the edge of the north grounds, watching her with his hands in the pockets of his silver-trimmed coat and an expression she couldn't quite name. "Reassigned?" he asked without preamble. She went back to raking. "I don't know what you're referring to, sir. You're raking dead leaves in the least trafficked section of the castle exterior at 7 in the morning, Lucian said. You've been relocated. I heard about the washing hall." Seraphine's hands tightened on the rake handle. "Delia has been pulling that kind of thing for a year and a half," Lucian said, his voice conversational but carrying an edge. "She's third-tier Beta's daughter, which gives her just enough status to make Omegas miserable, without quite enough to make herself interesting to anyone who matters. The Gamma boys she performed for have already forgotten it happened." He paused. "You're the only one who got punished. That's how the hierarchy works," Serafina said. The hierarchy works like that, because we let it, Lucian said, which was such a surprising thing for a beta prince to say that Seraphina actually stopped raking and looked at him. He met her gaze steadily. "Your eyes are doing it again," he said quietly. "The silver." "I don't know what you mean," she said. But she knew exactly what he meant. Because as she met his gaze, as the frustration and the cold and the strange peace of the north grounds and the memory of the washing hole, all pressed together in her chest, the light was coming to the surface. She could feel it, a rising tide behind her eyes, and she couldn't push it all the way back down. Lucian took one slow step closer, not threatening, curious. The way someone moves toward a fire, they want to understand without burning themselves. "6 years you've been in this castle," he said softly. "I've noticed you for 3 of them. Not in the way Delia would suggest. Don't misunderstand me. In the way of someone who finds a thing that doesn't fit the category it's been placed in and can't stop wondering why." He tilted his head. "What are you, Seraphina Vale?" The name. He used her name. Not girl or Omega or the bureaucratic designation. Her name. Something cracked. Very small. Very deep. The light surged, just once, just briefly, and for one unguarded second, Seraphine's silver eyes went incandescent white, like moonlight concentrated to a point, like starfall in the dark. Then she wrestled it back, gasping slightly, one hand pressed hard against her sternum. When she looked up, Lucian's expression had changed. The idle curiosity was gone. In its place was something else, something she could only describe as recognition, the look of a person encountering something they have been told cannot exist and finding that it does. "I need to tell you something," he said carefully, "and I need you to hear it before someone else finds out." Before she could respond, a sound cut across the north grounds, sharp, imperative. The summoning bell. The tone that meant the Alpha King required immediate attendance from his inner court. Lucian's jaw tightened. He looked toward the castle, then back at her. "The Luna selection is being announced today," he said quickly, publicly, in the great hall. "You'll hear the bells for the General Pack Assembly." He hesitated. "Don't react to whatever you hear. Whatever you feel when you hear it, don't react." "Why would I react?" Seraphina asked. "It has nothing to do with me." Lucian looked at her for a long, strange moment. "I hope you're right," he said. And he was gone, back toward the castle, his silver-trimmed coat catching the cold morning light. Seraphina stood alone in the north grounds. An hour later, the assembly bells rang. She stood at the far edge of the crowd of servants and lower-ranked pack members gathered, in the great courtyard, not in the great hall itself, which was reserved for ranked wolves, but in the outer courtyard, where the general announcement was relayed via the pack's audio relay system. A beta officer who stood at the great hall's outer doors and repeated the king's words at volume for those who could not be inside. She stood with her arms crossed against the cold and listened to the beta officer relay the High Priestess Marin's formal declaration. By the authority of the Moon Goddess and the sacred traditions of the Iron Moon Kingdom, Alpha King Kael'draven hereby announces the commencement of the Luna selection. All unmated she-wolves of ranking beta class and above, between the ages of 18 and 25, are invited to submit their names for consideration. Formal ceremonies will begin at the next full moon, 2 weeks hence. The selection will conclude with a final bonding ceremony. Seraphina stopped listening. Or rather, she stopped listening to the words, because something else entirely was happening. As the announcement rang out across the courtyard, as the assembled pack reacted, with excited noise and movement around her, something inside Seraphina Vale went absolutely silent. Not the familiar practiced silence of holding herself in. A different kind. The kind before a storm. The light, which had been flickering and rising and falling all day, went completely still. And then, with a clarity so sudden and complete that it felt like being struck by lightning, she felt it. A pull, not toward the announcement, not toward the crowd, toward the great hall, toward whoever was inside it. It started in her sternum, where the light lived, and radiated outward through her entire body in a wave of warmth so intense it was almost unbearable. It was like nothing she had ever felt before. It was like gravity and music and recognition and terror all compressed into a single physical sensation, pulling her toward something she couldn't see. No. She pressed both hands against her chest, hard enough to hurt. No, this is wrong. This is impossible. The pull intensified. And somewhere in the castle, behind all that black stone and silver marble, she somehow knew, the way you know something in the oldest part of yourself, the part that predates language, that on the other side of the wall, in the Great Hall, something had just happened to the Alpha King. Something that made him stop mid-sentence. Something that made his storm-gray eyes go very still. Something he could not explain, and would not, for some time, admit to. The pull lasted for 30 seconds. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it severed, cut off cleanly, like a wire snapped. The silence inside her shattered back into ordinary noise. The warmth drained away, leaving her cold and slightly nauseated, standing in the middle of the courtyard with both hands pressed to her chest and her copper hair loose from its braid in the wind. She looked up and found that the crowd around her had gone quiet, not because of anything she had done, because of the woman standing at the top of the great hall steps, the High Priestess Marin Ashvale. She was 60, or looked it, though everyone knew the High Priestess aged according to her own private schedule. She was dressed in the white and gold ceremonial robes of her office, and she had the kind of face that was not quite beautiful and not quite ugly, but was entirely, uncomfortably watchful, as though her eyes were recording everything they saw for purposes that would only be revealed much later. The High Priestess Marin was looking directly at Seraphina, from across the courtyard, past all the ranked wolves and baddis and assembled servants, directly at her. And her expression was not the expression of someone seeing an Omega girl for the first time. It was the expression of someone confirming something they had already known and feared. And in the High Priestess's pale, cold eyes, Seraphina saw it, the same thing she had heard beneath the dormitory floor the night before. Find the bloodline. Sever it.